So, welcome back to the Lift Your Life podcast. And I was actually just about to say welcome back to my old podcast name because we were literally talking about this. I have got Amy back on the podcast. Now, if you are an OG listener, Amy was on one of the first episodes that I ever did. And in that episode, we were talking, what were we talking about? Was it something to do with like just problems with the diet industry or something? Probably something along those lines.
I think so. If I remember correctly, I think it was around that topic. Yeah.
We've had a decent amount of sleepage since then, good 2 years pretty much. So I brought Amy back on because a lot's changed with Amy since we had her on the podcast, more so from her in terms of what she does now as a coach. So if you want to go listen to Amy's backstory, because it's an absolutely incredible story of how she got into the industry, please do go back to that episode because we're not going to do the whole Amy, introduce yourself, where you've come from. But I do want you to give a little bit of an introduction to the people and what it is that you specialize in. And then we'll just have a bit of a catch up as to what's happened from when you were last on the podcast to now. So you don't have to give the full shebang because you did it last time, but just quick intro, who you are, what you do, that sort of thing.
Yeah, of course. So firstly, thank you for having me back on because it's a pleasure. And it's amazing to see how much you've grown in your direction with your business as well, because I feel like it's a lot more kind of in line with who you are now. I think it feels a bit more, yeah, definitely. It feels a bit more kind of coherent. So for me personally, things have changed, like Lou said, since the last time I was on the podcast. I now specialize in binge and emotional eating. So I kind of help women with their relationship with food and their relationship with their bodies. So overcoming things like body image struggles, feeling confident in their skin, and really getting to the root cause of why people struggle with things like comfort eating, turning to food, binge eating, difficulty staying consistent with things like a healthy lifestyle, really kind of working through the internals of why those things actually happen and really helping them to get to the root cause to fix it.
Amazing. Well, we're going to be diving into that. That's what today's podcast is going to be. If you've read the title, you'll get that. That's what we're talking about. But we obviously don't want to do the backstory, but I kind of want to bridge the gap between where you were as a coach when we last had a chat, because it was totally different. You were at that time, I'm pretty sure, a hybrid PT, an online coach, and I'm sure you were sustainability at that point, your brand, your business.
Probably. Yeah, probably.
So let's talk about that transition from sustainability, which was like, you did a little bit of in-person, a little bit of online coaching. And I know you were very much about that sustainable lifestyle, none of this BS, slimming world, fad diet crap that we're both very much against. So what's happened between then and now in terms of this completely like a brand shift that you've had over the last few years? Talk us through that.
So I'd say the shift kind of happened almost in 3 phases, really. So I definitely remember, I think I was still under sustainability when I came on the podcast. And that's always been the forefront of my brand and my kind of business, is helping women to get to a point where they can sustain a lifestyle without a coach. So my kind of emphasis is I don't ever want to see you again. And I know that sounds horrible, but I essentially, if I've done a good job as a coach, you shouldn't have to keep coming back to me again and again and again. So my kind of emphasis is getting people to the point where you can sustain things yourself. You don't need anything outside of you to just maintain things like your nutrition, your training, etc., your mindset. But then what actually happened just before the pandemic hit is I started working in a gym, and I saw a different side to the fitness industry that I knew existed, but I didn't think that this gym specifically experienced and went through. And that was basically how they were drilling their clients into the ground to get a physical transformation, i.e. to lose weight, to look shredded on pictures, to get a before and after picture. And what we didn't see on social media and on in the Instagram is how run down these clients were in terms of, to put it bluntly, how fucked they were with their relationship with food, where they were struggling with binge eating. Their body image was horrendous. They were hardly sleeping. Anxiety was through the roof. They were having health issues. And that to me didn't sit right. So I obviously left that environment once I saw this side of the gym, and it burned an even greater fire in me to actually change the direction of my business completely, because I already helped women with their mindset around food. But I was like, I want to wholeheartedly specialize in binge and emotional eating, because it really opened my eyes to how many women especially do struggle with this topic. Obviously, men struggle as well, but because I do mostly specialize with women, it is extreme the amount of women that struggle with their relationship with food and their body image. It's roughly about 80%. But most of us don't think that that's the case because we feel so alone in the topic, because nobody talks about it because it brings up so much shame. So then we all go struggling in silence, so we don't talk to anyone. So we think we're alone, when actually probably the person you're speaking to is struggling with something along the same lines.
Can I quickly intervene, because this is a question I know I'll forget to ask at the end. So when you're saying people struggle in silence, do you think in some respects that people are struggling not because they're ashamed, but almost because in some respects it's normalized to struggle with food as a female?
Yeah.
Like, you know, fit
100%.
women, it's like I'm sure you said this because Amy did a webinar for my clients last year, which, just to let you know, Amy, loads of them, I watched it back and said it's bloody brilliant. You said something along the lines of, it's like in films and stuff, when women have like a breakup, we're always eating the Ben and Jerry's and smashing the Dominoes. It's kind of just normalized that we have these like emotional attachments to food, and the binge is a word that's like thrown around like as like nothing.
Yeah.
It's what you do, isn't it? Same way that you get brush your teeth, you just binge when you're sad, you know, it's what you do. So do you think that's a bit of an issue? I mean, we can delve into that in a bit, but I kind of wanted to ask your opinion on that because
No, 100%. It's a great question, because these things are conditioning that we grow up with that we don't often realize are part of our subconscious programming until we actually really dive into, oh, wait, that's why I think this way about food. Or, oh my God, it makes so much sense that this is why I think I need to lose a weight before I'm about to go on holiday. And if you look at all of the kind of conditioning and programming that society throws at us as women, we were brought up, especially in the generation that constantly compared women on the front of magazine covers, that was constantly sharing the new diet tips. It was like, this woman has just lost her baby weight within 1.6 hours after giving birth. This is how she did it. So come and follow the way that she does it. Dieting and food struggles and body image struggles have quite literally been thrown at us probably since the day that you were born. Yeah. So especially around food as well, it's become normalized. I think, just to kind of steer off topic a little bit, a lot of us joke about it because it is such a sensitive topic. So for example, for me, when I was the, in quotes, fat friend of the group, it became my identity, and I joked about it as a coping mechanism to deal with actually how painful it was. So I would say things like, oh, I'm the one that finishes everybody else's foods, or give it to me, the human garbage bin. And it's almost like we laugh it off and we joke it off, because then we don't actually have to deal with how painful it actually feels to struggle with food and to struggle with body image. So then a lot of us do notice that, okay, yeah, I'm the one that's always dieting, or maybe we've got more of a lighthearted feel to it. Or likewise, a lot of us don't speak about it because we just think it's normal. And a lot of us as well don't know the kind of signs or symptoms of binge eating or emotional eating. So then again, we think it's normal. So things like hiding food when when somebody is coming in, or you've maybe eaten in your car on the way back. Things like constantly wondering and worrying about losing weight, constantly fearing gaining weight after you've eaten something, is a sign of a disordered relationship with food. All of these kind of normalized concepts around food in our body, again, we just think are just part of being a woman, or we might not even recognize that that's a thought until somebody actually speaks about it, and then we reflect and think, oh wait, I do that, and it comes to the surface of how often we actually do it. Like, for example, a few years ago, I realized that every time I wake up for the toilet during the night, I put my hand over my stomach, and it's almost like a test of like, do I have abs today, or do I have a little bit more body fat today, or am I bloated today? And I didn't even realize until, oh, sorry.
It's all good.
We might just have to skip that bit up, crop that bit if I can.
Tech issue over. It happens.
Yeah. So as I was saying, I used to walk in the middle of the night, and it clicked one night that I did it. And I'd been doing this for maybe 10, 15 years. Yeah. And it blew my mind when I was like, how have I not noticed that I do this so instinctively? And I think this is what it is that most of us just do it so automatically. Or for example, when I used to sit down, I used to automatically pull my t-shirt out to kind of cover my stomach, or I'd put a pillow over my stomach to try and hide it. And all of it is so subconscious that we don't even realize we're doing these things, or maybe thinking these thoughts, until somebody brings it into our awareness, and then they come up to the forefront.
Wow. Yeah, that's actually quite powerful, and I think that'll definitely get people thinking after this. So obviously you finished at this gym because you realized that, you know, you saw this really, really dark side to the industry, and obviously then you became passionate about that. So then what happened there? Because you said it was kind of like a 3-part process. So how did that transition then from that into sort of where you're at right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when the pandemic started, I think a lot of people will resonate with the fact that it brought up a lot of struggles with food for a lot of people, because all of a sudden, not only were we home all the time, but especially if you were home parenting, if you were homeschooling for your kids, the amount of stress that can add to people, and then stress and anxiety is a huge trigger for binge eating and cravings. A lot of people did notice that different coping mechanisms that didn't serve them started to increase. So things like turning to alcohol more, turning to things like shopping more as a way to distract from difficult emotions, turning to food more was especially a big one. And that's when I really started to notice that a lot of my clients at the time were struggling, and that more people that followed me on Instagram were also struggling. So that's kind of when I ventured then into specializing in binge and emotional eating. And I created what was then known as my emotional eating and behavior change course, which is now kind of transitioned from one-to-one coaching. Then it became a group coaching program. And now it's the online course, which is the Food Freedom Framework, which is now accessible to everybody just whenever you want to buy it, type of thing. So yeah, that's the kind of transition from PT in the gym, online coach, kind of specializing in a little bit of everything, to really niching down into this one area.
Amazing. If you don't mind me asking, what's made you change from obviously working very, very closely with people sort of one-on-one to, do you work with anyone one-on-one now, or is it all literally just this online programs and that's how you help and support people?
All online. The reason being is I can help more people. I love working with people one-to-one, which is why I still really love having that kind of interaction with people. So I still have the Facebook group for everybody that buys FFF and everybody that is in there, so that I can still have that kind of personal touch to it and that guidance if they have any questions, because I love that aspect of it, which I'm sure obviously I know you'll agree with as well. But it allows me to help more people, because when I realized how many women actually struggle with this, there's too many for me to handle in a one-to-one capacity without burning out or reducing and diluting the service that I would give to each client. So yeah, it really helps me to kind of help multiple people. And also it helps the client because they can go back and watch specific modules. They can take it at their own pace. So if they're not able to jump on a one-to-one call, they can just wait and then just watch the course whenever they're ready. So it's kind of the best of both worlds in that scenario, where I'm a lot more open to be able to give more information to people without it being overwhelming. And it's more time efficient for the person that's watching it at the same time.
Brilliant. That's awesome. So that's where you're at right now. Now, that kind of lends itself onto the next question, but to be honest, I think you kind of covered it. So I know in general you were just very, very, very sort of into sustainability and food relationships and stuff. That's always something that you've been very, very passionate about. And I know in fitness, they always say you need to niche right down. Now, when you see people saying they niche down, they do, but they don't. Like, for example, myself, I am not like I do bang on this. I would say that I'm niche in the respect that I work with women very much like you did in the past. It was all about sustainability, body confidence, self-love, looking the best, feeling the best, no fatty BS. Mm-hmm. But you are very, 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 this is the one thing that I help my people with, because you are a very knowledgeable individual. I've known Amy for years, and honestly, I used to see Amy in the gym all the time, and you could never just go and say, hi Amy, you all right? You'd always learn something from her. You'd always pick up something from her, because she's just a knowledge bomb. She knows so much about training and nutrition and just general life and fitness, that in some respects it almost seems wasted that you're just niching down on this one thing, if that makes sense, because your knowledge is incredible. So
Thank you.
Stop it. So what actually made you do that then? So what is it that made you go, actually, do you know what? I know all this shit. I know so much about fitness and health, and I could niche down in this. I could be a bit more generalized, because I know so much about how to help people with training and nutrition and sustainability and longevity and things like hormones. I know you know loads about that, like the female menstrual cycle, because you helped me out with some knowledge bombs when I struggled. So why did you just decide to go, actually, do you know what? I'm just going to focus in on this one thing and not neglect everything else that I've learned, but just put that on the back burner and just niche down on this one thing? How did that come about?
That's such a good question, because you'll know me, I'm an information nerd. Like, I love the human body. I love psychology. I love neuroscience. I love behavior change. I love everything about how humans work. And the amazing thing about binge and emotional eating is it's one topic, but I cover everything that you need to know around that topic, because I think a lot of people hear binge and emotional eating and they think food. And it's like, there is so much more that comes into it from a psychological perspective. How we train can affect whether or not we have cravings, how we sleep, our hormones, our menstrual cycle ties into cravings. So I kind of take all of the different areas of things and pull it together to actually help people to truly overcome it. Because this is what a lot of people say when they come to me is, I've tried CBT, or I've tried a dietitian, or I've tried a personal trainer. It hasn't worked. I'm broken. What's wrong with me? And it's like, because binge eating is multifaceted. So if you've gone to a CBT specialist or a different type of therapist, for example, and they've focused on mindset and emotions, that might be helpful for some people, which is amazing. But if you're still then under eating, or if you're not sleeping enough, so then your hunger hormones are out of whack, or for example, if you are doing a lot of cardio that can trigger a stress response, and then that's increasing a trigger for binge eating, you're still going to experience cravings for food and binge eating. Yeah. So I think that's where, yes, I'm niched, if you will, but there are so many different aspects that I tie together in a step-by-step process inside FFF, because I'm very aware that when you hear that, it can be like, oh my God, I've got to overhaul everything in my entire life. And that's not the case. Like, that really isn't the case. When we focus on very practical techniques, like, for example, psychological techniques that I teach, as well as things like nutritional methods that I use, that covers pretty much everything that encompasses nutrition anyway, pretty much everything that encompasses psychology. So it's literally just taking the entire concepts that I learned about and know about and qualifying and specializing, and then niching it down into, here's a 5-minute psychological technique that you can use every day that will eliminate cravings. And I know, and I teach a little bit of the reason that this works is because of this, and this, but you don't really need to know the in-depths of it in order to overcome it. You can just follow this practical technique and it will help you to completely eliminate cravings. So it satisfies the nerd in me and it's also extremely effective, because then we're coming at it from all angles. So there's no stone left unturned for the client.
That's amazing. That sounds really awesome. I'm going to come on to that in a bit, actually. So I don't want, obviously, you to give away all your secrets, because that's why people come to you. But I do want to sort of delve into that more, because like you said, when you said the word binge eating, you just literally kind of have this, if you were like to just say, right, binge eating, what's coming to your mind? You just see this picture of just like food everywhere. And that's just the first thing. And that's what people think about. And that's what people try and stop, isn't it? That's what people try and work through. So I'm going to go on a diet, I'm going to stop eating this, I'm going to avoid this. It's all strategies around food, but obviously, like you say, it's multifaceted. And I know bits and bobs, but I would like to delve into that more and learn more. But the first thing that I want to cover, and we have touched on it a little bit earlier in the podcast, is why is it such an issue? And like you were saying, about 80% of women struggle with these sort of things. And from women that have come to me and gone through me, so many of them, when I give that initial consultation form, report issues with food, and especially the word binge. Now, when you sort of classify the word binge, are you looking at it from the perspective of the more sort of generalized, just eating, sort of feeling a little bit out of control, or are you looking at it more towards that sort of clinical level? Because when people say binge, it's quite a subjective term. So in your course, how is it that you're kind of categorizing binge? And when people come to you and ask about it, do you have to sort of pre-qualify them? Because, when some people say, oh, I binge all the time, it's like, no, you just have an extra chocolate bar a day. That's not a binge. So talk to me a little bit about that in terms of what you classify a binge as, what binge eating actually is from your perspective, and why you think it is so dominant in the world right now.
I have personally a different opinion on this that I think a lot of people do, because a lot of people will think that binge eating is BED, which is binge eating disorder. And that's categorized by things like a deep feeling of shame and guilt after eating, feeling completely out of control around food. So it's like a complete inability to stop once you get started. And that is binge eating disorder, as well as things like the rumination about food, the obsessive thoughts about food, feeling like you can't think about anything else other than food all day, as well as things like an obsession with losing weight and dieting. But the reason that I don't specify specifically with that and kind of almost disqualify anybody that just sees it as, oh, I've just overeaten a little bit, is because it can then make people feel like I don't deserve to get help. And I'm pretty sure from your perspective as well as mine, both Lucy and I have both struggled with eating disorders in the past. I went through that process where I was like, I'm not skinny enough to get help. I'm not thin enough to lose weight. I'm not disordered enough to lose weight or to get help. And it can stop people from getting the help that they actually deserve and they need. Absolutely. Because they feel like they don't get kind of grouped into this category of being technically diagnosed with something. The other reason as well, so I'm not technically a psychologist, so just to kind of put that disclaimer out there, so I can't specifically diagnose or treat or specific eating disorders. However, I don't personally use the phrase disorder with my clients, because when we think of binge eating disorder, if we think of it as a disorder, it makes us think that it's inherent to us. And this is the same with things like anorexia disorder or bulimia. It makes us think that it's inherently part of us, which isn't the case. Binge eating and anorexia and bulimia and other disordered eating patterns are coping mechanisms, and they are a biological response to things like restriction, and they are a response to things like trauma and pain and ways that we've learned to cope with things like stress and anxiety. They are behaviors that point us to a deeper issue rather than it being a disorder, which is something that's inherently wrong with us. The same with things like anxiety and depression. I personally don't see them as disorders, not because I'm invalidating the fact that they are a real struggle for people, but because they are not an inherent part of who you are. They're a sign of things like if our nervous system is dysregulated, if we're experiencing some sort of trauma, if we've got deeper kind of root issues that are struggling with that, anxiety and depression will then be at the forefront, and we think that that is the thing to treat rather than the thing that's actually underneath that that's causing these behaviors.
Absolutely.
So I personally don't use the word disorder with my clients, not because I invalidate the fact that it is technically a disorder and that you deserve to get the treatment and the diagnosis that you need in order to heal, but because one, I don't want you to think it's inherently part of you, because it isn't and you can overcome it. And two, because I don't want you to identify with it. Anytime we identify with a behavior, like, for example, I'm a binge eater, I'm the fat friend, I'm the one that's always on a diet, I'm the one that doesn't have any control around food, it makes it harder to overcome because psychologically our brain likes to know who we are. So it will subconsciously perform and seek out behaviors that are in line with our identity and who we see ourselves as.
Self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? It's like you tell yourself
Exactly.
something, your behaviors align with it.
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, when I used to struggle with food, one of the biggest kind of issues that came off the back of that was insomnia. And I used to refer to myself as an insomniac, and it took me 5 years to overcome. And that's because if I identify as an insomniac, as someone that struggles with sleep, every time I hit the pillow, every time my head goes onto the pillow, my first thought is I'm not going to be able to sleep because I am an insomniac. It's who I am, which isn't the case. It was a behavior that was coming to the forefront because of different things related to stress and my relationship with food and the association that my brain had made with sleep. So when we identify with it, it can make it more difficult for us to overcome. So I much prefer to treat and look at binge eating as what it is, which is a behavior of something deeper and a coping mechanism of something deeper, rather than seeing it as this kind of inherent thing that's wrong with you or that you were born with.
That's amazing. I really like that. I really do. Because not many people have that sort of mindset. And I think as well, the word, I'm with you on that one. I really don't like the word disorder.
Yeah.
It's like basically saying you are disordered, you are this, you are not right in the head. And it just put this very, very negative label on you. And I think that in itself can really impact people's sort of self-efficacy and belief to improve. And it's like, this is you're wrong, something wrong with you. It's like, well, okay, so that's not gonna motivate you to change, is it? Because like you just
exactly shame will never motivate us to change, and shame is actually being associated with a greater dependency on destructive behaviors like turning to drugs or turning to alcohol or turning to food. But we often think, well, if I hate myself into change, then it will motivate me, but it doesn't. It does the complete opposite. So if we throw around the word disorder to people that are already struggling with so much shame and self-hatred because of the fact that they binge, it then adds almost another layer of shitness onto them that almost feels like a trap where they think there's something wrong with them. And when we struggle with binge eating, we already think there's something wrong with us when there isn't. It's just that we're not necessarily identifying and looking at the reason why your brain is creating these cravings, because your brain is causing you to turn to food for a reason. And when we heal that reason, the binge eating stops.
Yeah, absolutely. So with binge eating, the prevalence rates in sort of different countries is quite interesting, isn't it? If you look at those sort of studies and statistics, and they tend to sort of, they do sort of say, don't they? It's usually the white middle class, the people who struggle with eating disorders the most. What's your stance on that from your sort of experience working with them? And do you actually think there is sort of certain types of people, whether that's looking at like gender differences, whether that's looking at race, culture, ethnicity, things like that, that have a higher prevalence? Or do you think that it is generally is just across the board more people struggle than realize, but because only certain people are labeled as, you know, seen usually as having these sort of issues, they're the people that come forward more? What's your experience like with that?
That's a good question. Just to talk from my own personal experience with working with women, I haven't seen any kind of defining factor that would cause me to think that it's related to a specific gender or ethnicity or sex or age. There is such a wide variety of women that I work with in all aspects of life. And the thing that I see, the commonalities that I see with clients is a lot of them struggle with people pleasing and not knowing how to rest and to ask for help. So the kind of constantly the strong one, the constantly the one that has to put on a brave face for everybody else. And that's often why we can turn to food as well, is if we feel like it's the only source of relief that we get throughout the day. They are often people that have struggled with some sort of pain or trauma around their weight or their body. So whether that could be from being bullied for their weight during school, it could be that their parents or their caregiver put them on a diet from a very young and early age. It could be that they were in an abusive relationship and somebody constantly body shamed them. It's usually related to some sort of struggle around their body and some sort of struggle around food, which is why they've developed these kind of behaviors. Obviously, I think both of us know the importance of things like genetics when it comes to the predisposition for things like eating disorders. But there is also the field of science called epigenetics, which is our ability to essentially switch on or switch off different genes depending on lifestyle factors and things like societal upbringing. So, for example, if somebody has had an upbringing where they were constantly exposed to diets, they were constantly body shamed, and they maybe experienced some sort of trauma, whatever that could be for them, it's pretty much guaranteed that they're going to struggle with food at some point because their environment is conducive towards that sort of behavior. And if they were never taught how to regulate their emotions by their parents because their parents didn't know how to, and then all of a sudden they learned that food helps them to deal with stress and it gives them a short-term relief from anxiety, that person again then will struggle with food. Yes. So I've personally seen it more so from the perspective of almost upbringing or certain behaviors or experiences or environments that people have gone through, rather than it being related to things like ethnicity or race or age or sex and things like that.
Amazing. Mm-hmm. Do you see any sort of differences then from people who've come to you in terms of people actually coming forward and saying, you know, like, I'm struggling with this, that, and the other, in terms of people have said that they've been embarrassed because of X, Y, and Z to speak about it, you know, their job, the fact that they've, do you know what I'm trying to say there? Because I know for some people in it's like some cultures and stuff, it's almost, it's like in, I don't want to say it if I'm wrong, but like Indian cultures and things like that, where food is a lot more celebratory and food is to be loved. There's certain cultures where food is a lot more just, you know, you should love food and this, that, and the other. Have you ever had anything where people have like said, because of the position I'm in, I shouldn't be feeling like this, or I'm struggling to feel like this, but I do, and what's wrong with me, sort of thing? Anything like that?
I'll be honest, I have had it with different kind of backgrounds in terms of ethnic backgrounds, but the main thing I've seen is people feeling guilty for not loving their body because of the body positivity movement.
Okay.
And this is quite a controversial topic that I talk about quite a lot because I am all for the body positivity movement. Let me just kind of put that out there. I love the fact that we should be celebrating every size, every shape, every woman. The difference is weight loss by itself and wanting to change your body isn't inherently toxic. It's not this kind of dangerous, forbidden, demonic thing that will automatically lead to unhealthy relationship with food and unhealthy diet culture standards and all of these things. It's the way that we do it. And a lot of people come to me struggling with the conflict because they feel guilty for wanting to change their body and lose weight. Or, for example, I had a lady that messaged me the other day saying she feels guilty for not feeling confident in her body postpartum because she recognizes the fact that her body has just grown and birthed and fed a little baby and she should feel grateful for it. But she's struggling with the fact that she doesn't because she feels self-conscious at the minute. But then we've got the body positivity movement telling us that we shouldn't want to lose weight at all because it's coming for the wrong reasons, and that we should always feel confident in our body. And it's okay as women to want to feel good, and it's okay to want to look good. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that we're coming at it from two different ends of the spectrum of extremes, where we've got diet culture on one side that is you're only good enough if you've lost weight. And then we've got the body positivity on the other hand, which is saying you're only good enough if you feel confident and you can't want to lose weight because then that's feeding into this bullshit narrative. And the truth always lies in the middle. It's always coming back to that kind of balance and that gray area, which is you can absolutely want to lose body fat and you can want to change your body as long as it's coming from the place of a good intention behind it, i.e. not because you hate yourself, but because you actually respect and love yourself and want to feel good. And that the approach that you're using behind it is healthy and sustainable and not extreme and restrictive. So I wouldn't necessarily say I've noticed any trends with the types of people that message me. A lot of people that are very high up in kind of like corporate careers, and they've got maybe like a really successful and challenging job, whatever that looks like for them, because success is all subjective, but they often have a lot of pride around the fact that they've got a really good career, a really good family life, like they've got good money coming in, all of the other cogs in their life seem to be working really well. And it's almost like this pride feeling of, why the fuck can't I get a grip on food? Where it's like, why is it this one aspect of my life that I can't get a grip over? And those are the people I notice are the ones that don't speak up much. Like they don't talk to their family or their friends about it. They don't talk about it to their spouse or their husband. And again, a lot of it is this fear of not wanting to sound weak or be vulnerable, because they've got this kind of strong person armor on that is, I've always had to be the strong one. I can't let anybody see me. And again, all of these kind of more psychological, deeper root kind of struggles start to come to the surface when we look at food.
Absolutely. Brilliant. So the next thing I kind of wanted to ask was about the solutions. So, but more so where people typically do go wrong. So obviously this is a big issue. And from what I've seen with a lot of people, the thing that the way people want to try and solve their issues with food is by going, right, so I've got this issue with food, and I've seen it with like coaching consultations, and some of the ladies I work with have said like, right, so I binge on this food and I struggle with this food, so what I want to do is I just want to get rid, I just want to, abstain from this food, I want to avoid it, I want to go on this really strict diet, you want to tell me what to do. And I am not as clued up as you are, but I know for a fact whenever anyone says that to me, I'm just like, whoa. That is the worst thing you can do, because you are just throwing yourself into this cycle of restrict, want, cave, repeat. So with yourself, what are sort of the biggest sort of issues in terms of the things people think they should do or have done in terms of trying to solve the problem, but it isn't solving the problem, if that makes sense? So what people, when people come to you, what have they tried before? What sort of common things people think seem to be the right thing to do to solve binge eating, but clearly aren't?
Yeah. So just to touch on it, the one that you just said is really common. So restricting or taking your favorite foods out of the house, for example. And a lot of coaches and personal trainers do tell their clients to do this. And even dietitians sometimes tell their clients to do this. And it is a one-way ticket to binging whenever you do finally get a taste of that food. Yep. And my approach to helping people overcome binge eating isn't restricting the binge food. It isn't taking out the binge food. It's helping you feel confident and in control in every single situation, no matter what food is around you. So for example, one of my previous clients, Kulvinder, she used to work in an office where she was on the end desk, which is where all of the chocolate would pile up. It's where all of the sweets would pile up on a Friday. The dominoes would be sat there. So if I was to tell her, okay, I want you to take the chocolate out of your house and take the sweets out of your house so you don't binge.
You're going to want it more.
Food, exactly. That food is going to be like Kulvinder, when she's sat on that desk, it's going to cause the cravings to increase even more. Yeah, exactly. So then when she finally caves, understandably, because there's only so much we can actually give into those cravings, it will then become a free-for-all, because then we then have the fear of, I've not got this when I go back home. So I've got to make the most out of it now so that I can start fresh when I go home. And then I've got it out of my system. So it's almost filled up my tank so that then I can prolong the period of time that I go without it again. So it's just a catalyst for binging when we do finally have an environment where we're around that food. And it might not be at work, but the next time Christmas comes along, or you want to go on holiday and you want to enjoy an ice cream over the summer, you want to be able to feel in control and trust yourself around that food, no matter what the food is. Yeah. So that's definitely one of them. The other is relying on willpower. So a lot of my clients come to me and they think that they've got low willpower, and they think that they've got low self-control around food. And it isn't anything to do with low willpower or low self-control, because the thing is with willpower, we're often using too much of it when we struggle with food. And the reason that I say that is, just to give you a practical example, don't think of Santa Claus. You probably just thought of Santa Claus, or the image of it popped into your head at least. And this is because the brain can't think in negatives. So what happens when we try to use willpower is that we tell ourselves to not think of the food, to distract ourselves, to avoid the food at all costs, to just keep working and keep going. But all the brain hears is think of the food, think of the craving, increase the craving. So it actually then increases the craving that we've got for food, because we're telling ourselves to not think of something, which puts our focus on that very thing.
Like telling yourself, no, I'm not going to worry about this exam, I'm not going to stress about this exam, but then you are stressing about it by doing that, aren't you? Because you just reminding yourself of the exam, and then you reminding yourself that you are deep down. And the thing is, you can't just tell yourself to feel a certain way if you feel that way. So I just like, I'll be fine. But if you're not fine, telling yourself that is just like putting this little tiny crappy 99p shot plaster on it that's not really going to do anything, is it really?
Exactly. So it's not actually that you lack willpower, it's actually that you're using too much willpower, which blows people's minds when I first tell them that. It isn't anything to do with the fact that you're weak or that you're broken or that you lack self-control. It's absolutely none of those. It's because the craving is there so often and you're constantly thinking about food that you're draining your willpower. So then you come home most likely in the evening and it's a binge because you're so mentally exhausted from thinking about food all day. So just to give you a kind of practical step to help in that scenario, instead of trying to use willpower to resist the craving, we actually just want to allow or accept the craving. And that doesn't mean that we give into it, but it means that we kind of think of it almost like the background noise, where we carry on doing what we're doing and actually allow the craving to be there. The analogy that I give is kind of like when you're trying to fall asleep, imagine it's like a ticking clock that's in the background. You know it's there, you allow it to be there. You don't try and resist or fight the fact that the clock is there because it will make you focus on the clock even more. So instead, we just focus on the fact that we're allowing the clock to be there, we're allowing the craving to be there, while we focus on whatever you're doing. So for example, with the ticking clock analogy, focusing on deep breathing to get you into sleep, or focusing on feeling restful, for example. And that way you're not resisting the craving, which means that you will actually then increase the craving. You're actually just allowing it to be there. And you'll notice that the craving fades when you're no longer trying to resist it.
That's brilliant. That kind of lends itself onto the last thing that I want to talk about. Now, I actually saw it on your story today, and this is what prompted me to ask this. Now, I don't want you to expect you to go into complete detail with this one. We've been going on for quite a while, and two, this is where people will come to your course for. But you mentioned that obviously binge eating is this multifaceted thing. And I think someone asked a question about like they've done CBT, and that's because CBT only focuses on the emotions. I think you shared like 6 or 7 different like layers to binge eating. So just to wrap up, just to really just give people a little bit of context and actually open up people's eyes, whether people are struggling or not. Are you all right to share what those are in terms of like the different things that come into it and how they can all influence binge eating based behaviors?
Yeah, of course. So there's 4 main areas that we cover when it comes to binge and emotional eating. And in order to truly overcome it, we want to make sure that we've got all of them covered so that we've not got any stone left unturned. The first is nutrition. And I personally start off with nutrition because it's kind of like the foundation to everything. Because if we're under eating or we're going for long periods of time without food, or maybe we might be calorie counting because that can be a trigger for binge eating, all of these things can trigger cravings and urges to turn to food. So even if mentally we're using a lot of psychological kind of reframing and CBT techniques, for example, to reframe what we think of food, if we're still under eating, our body will physiologically crave food because it knows we're not eating enough. So this is the kind of foundation layer that I always go in with. Let's make sure you're eating enough, make sure you're fueling your body, you're going a good amount of time in between meals so that your blood sugar levels aren't dropping. You've got a balanced meal, again, to maintain blood sugar levels so that that's not then a trigger for binge eating. The second we then dive into is mindset. So this is reframing how we see calories, how we see food, because if we think things like, I can't eat this food, I shouldn't eat this food is bad for me, I'm a bad person, or I've failed my diet if I eat this food, all of these things can trigger more binge eating because it's a form of what we call mental restriction. So if you're mentally restricting the foods that you should or shouldn't have, it can cause our brain to crave them because we feel like we shouldn't be having them. Yeah. Kind of like when you tell a kid to not press on a button, their brain wants to press on it even more. So even if, for example, you're on a diet and you're saying, but I haven't taken chocolate out completely. If you are mentally restricting by saying things like, I'm only allowed this one piece of chocolate, it will still cause you to crave the food. Yeah, exactly. The third is then emotions, because a lot of us haven't learned how to regulate and cope with our emotions. So we've learned that food is the quickest way for us to do that. So this is things like how to cope with things like stress, anxiety, boredom, loneliness, anger, frustration, without needing food as a vice or a coping mechanism to do that. The fourth is then where we go in with psychological techniques. So this helps to rewire and reprogram the part of the brain that is creating cravings. So it sounds more complex and complicated than it actually is. These are all really simple, like 5-minute techniques that are quite literally just part of your day, super easy to use, but it restructures the way that your brain sees food. So it's no longer craving or urging you to get towards food. And then what we also cover inside FFF, my program, is body image and body confidence, because a lot of us turn to food or we turn to dieting because the root issue is that we struggle with something related to our body image or body confidence, because we wouldn't diet unless we wanted to look a different way, right? So our body image is almost the foundation of why we struggle with our relationship with food a lot of the time. So to truly heal our relationship with food, we also want to heal our relationship with our body. And that often comes with things like a fear of weight gain. Because if we fear weight gain, it can cause us to keep going towards really restrictive, extreme diets. And then that can trigger binge eating. So we kind of have to go through the process of overcoming the fear of weight gain in order to get to a point where we can actually stop binge eating.
Amazing. Yeah, there's more to it than people think. And obviously, I'm going to say this now that I am absolutely no expert on this. I've studied it obviously at uni. I've done the Break Binge Eating course, Dr. Jake Leonard, I think it's called, his course, done that. So I've learned as much as I can learn, and I can support as much as I can support. But anyone out there who is listening to this, who really is struggling with this, I am going to pass on and say, you know what, Amy definitely is the person for you. And I would really highly recommend her course. Knowing, I've not seen it myself, but knowing what I know about Amy, knowing what I've seen from her results from her Instagram, and just knowing for myself with my years of knowing her, how knowledgeable and caring she is, it'll help you out. So Amy, on that note, couple of things. One, if people are just genuinely interested, because Amy's really good at like the reels and TikTok sort of thing with her content. I'm shit at that. Amy's Instagram is like banging for that. Just little quick tips. No, I mean, don't down yourself. They look really good. So firstly, if people want to go,
upping you. I'm not downing me. I'm upping you. Your TikToks and reels are good. Your content's amazing.
Oh, shut up. But anyway, if people want to go and just dive in on your content, whether this is something people struggle with or not. I like listening to Amy's content. I think it's really, really interesting. Firstly, where can they find you on the socials?
So my Instagram is _Amy Pickering, and that is the same on TikTok as well. And then I also have a podcast, which is called the Inside Out Podcast. So if you do kind of want more longer length explanations of things like binge and emotional eating with tips, then you can find that on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify.
Wonderful. And then for anyone who wants to take it that one step further and maybe look into the course, where can they inquire? How do they do it? How do they get on it?
Yeah. So if you go onto my Instagram or TikTok, any of my socials, it's always the link in my bio. Or if you've got any questions, obviously feel free to DM me. We cover all of the phases that we need to in order to overcome binge and emotional eating and heal your body image, but it's not complex. So binge eating is multifaceted. So there's different aspects to it, but it can actually be really simple and kind of run you through this step-by-step process in order to overcome it. So I know it can sound overwhelming at first when you hear all of these different aspects of binge eating, but like I say, the actual steps themselves are really simple and easy to apply, that you will be blown away at how simple it actually can be.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, people go slide in Amy's DMs if you are wanting help and support with that. That wraps us up nicely. Is there anything you want to kind of close on? Is there any closing thoughts, anything else that you think we've not covered that is super, super, super mega important to cover? Just to wrap up, or are you good? You all talked out?
You can overcome binge eating is the main thing that I want to say, because so many people have a limiting belief that they are a lost cause and that they've tried everything. And I get it. Like, I've been there, and I've worked with so many women that have been there where they feel like they've literally tried everything and they've exhausted all options. You haven't. Trust me, you haven't. And the reason I say it with so much confidence is because every single woman that has said that to me has then overcome binge eating and kept off the binge eating bandwagon, if you will, for years and years and years and years and years, forever. So the techniques that we teach are quick, they're effective, but most importantly, they're sustainable. They lead to the long lasting changes because it changes how your brain's wired. So I just want to kind of, for anybody out there that might be doubting themselves and thinking, oh, I can see how that would work, but I don't think it'll work for me. Or maybe you think, yeah, I trust that her method works, but I don't trust myself to follow through with it. That's another really common one. This is what I help you with. So if you are struggling, reach out to either Luce or I. If you've got any questions, like, both of us are always happy to help. So don't suffer in silence. Don't struggle by yourself. You don't need to.
No, we're not those. Someone literally asked me the other day, I just sent them a message and said, oh, if there's anything I can help with, let me know. She goes, do I have to pay for it? I said, what, just for my advice? She went, yeah. I was like, no. If you've got a question, just slide in my DMs, unless you actually wanted me to like literally write you up a training plan in the DMs. That's not going to happen. But general questions, honestly, me and Amy, this is what we do. We enjoy helping people. So anytime, any place, anywhere, within reason.
Yeah. Don't just come to my house, please.
Excuse me, I've got a question. Hon, it's 10 o'clock at night. Sleep prioritization.
Literally.
Thank you so much for your time, Amy. That's been really, really insightful. Really, really motivating as well. For people out there, I think knowledge is power. I really, really do with anything. And I think I've learned a lot from that. So I think anyone And I know there will be people listening to this. I'm sure some of my current clients who do struggle with this as well will have found this super informative. And I think just understanding things more can just, like we said, take away that disorder. There's something wrong with you, and actually say, this is why it is. It's not your fault. It happens. And there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Exactly. If you can understand the reason why we behave in certain ways, it can already start to reduce the shame and the self-hatred and the frustration that we feel around it. And like you say, knowledge is power, but then applying that knowledge is just, it will change your life, like truly change your life. I think both Luce and I will be advocates for healing your relationship with food is absolutely life-changing.
Oh yeah. And like, if we've done it, anyone can do it. There's nothing special about us two, let's be real. Just two basic bitches, really. You know what I mean? Amazing. Well, Amy, I'm going to let you crack on with your day. But to everyone who's listened to this, obviously, if you've enjoyed it, screenshot, tag us both. Anything that me and Amy can help out with, let us know. And obviously, please do go give Amy a follow. Go show her some support, because, like I said, her content is very, very interesting. It's very, very informative. And even if this is not something that you do struggle with, I think just to educate yourself on it is really, really powerful, regardless. So please do go show her some support and give her a follow after watching this. But that is it. Thank you for rejoining us, Amy. You will be joining us again probably in 2 years' time. And we'll see you on the next one, guys.